podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I very much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace, God.
Peace.
So here we are, and this week you sent a couple pieces my way, which is our custom to send things back and forth between each other and amongst our larger circle of brotherhood. That may be good things to review, reflect, think about. And those two pieces on the video side, or content side, discussions around it's the myth, propaganda, black buying power, and you set it up a little smoother to me, specifically who was involved in that piece. Could you run that down real quick?
Yeah. So you got Professor Bull, who's been doing a lot of work and really involved in the community, looking at things from an academic and kind of intellectual perspective for some time. And then you got the brothers from Leaders for Beautiful Struggle. And they've been really, really engaged in Baltimore, just before the uprisings, during and after, just around really pressing kind of like the powers that be or status quo, just about Black folks getting what they need in the area. So those were the folks that were involved in that. So, it was interesting for me, just to look at and kind of think about these ideas that we all hold for granted. If nothing else, over the last month or so, there are a lot of ideas that have been taken for granted in the kind of American psyche. And I know you'll talk a little bit more about this, about how you kind of evaluate that, that we're all challenging, right? Let's just say that. And one of them, is this idea of the Black buying the dollar, right? And this idea that our road to salvation, our road to comprehensive community change, is if we can figure out this conversation around the Black dollar and spending it. And as we've talked about, there's this premise that, or this study, wherever this study was done, and whoever this study was done by, this study that showed that the Black dollar leaves in 15 minutes, Jewish dollar leaves in 2 days, and the Asian dollar, which we've talked about, we don't know what Asian group, right? Because all Asians are not the same. Right. That it leaves in a week or whatever, however long it takes to leave. And one of the first things that comes out about this conversation for me is this. The person always talking about the Black dollar always has something to sell. Number one.
Absolutely.
Right? They're talking about an ecosystem conversation while they're looking to do something extremely transactional, right? The second thing about that conversation is it brings to bear, again, in this larger way of thinking about the world. If you take I'm going to just use the Jewish dollar, and one that assumes and asserts that all Jews get along, which is not true, right? And it assumes that the specifics of cultural Judaism, the different branches of religious Judaism, that all those things connect, which is often not true. But does that mean that you give your money to a wealth manager? Does that mean that, how does the dollar stay in? Are you asserting that all Jews only eat at Jewish-owned restaurants? Right? Because I can tell you, in the kind of area that you see a large population of Jewish folks in this city, all the restaurants that they eat at ain't Jewish. Yeah. Squirrel Hill is mostly Asian restaurants, right? Like Mediterranean restaurants. They ain't Jewish, all the folks that those folks go and eat. They might all be kosher, but they ain't all Jewish owned. In fact, I would argue that the neighborhood is best known for pizza and Chinese food. So you have that conversation, and what that means. And third is this idea of the silver bullet. You know what I mean? And the silver bullet conversation to me is, if we only do this, everything will change. If we only stop killing each other, everything will be okay. If we only have better families, everything will be okay. If we only, spend more with each other, everything will be okay. Challenge is, there was a time that we did a lot of those things and everything wasn't okay. Now, it might have been a different okay than today, but it wasn't the time. It's like that nostalgia that sometimes is crippling, because there are people who remember, there are people still in this generation who remember when we did spend more with each other, but you didn't have access to the global markets, right? So that's the other side.
Right.
Like, yeah, we spent a lot more with each other, and you had a lot of people who did a lot of things, but you also couldn't create like a market. You couldn't like buy stocks and different things.
Yeah, and you could not just, if you still faced external pressures that would actively try to limit what you did, what type of companies you ran, what type of businesses you started. Even back to, if you look into to A.G. Gaston, the thing that allowed him to develop such a large, financial platform was that he delivered primarily a service that he could only deliver to Black people. Because what,
Exactly.
you know what I'm saying, which was the insurance in terms of death benefits or whatever. And then that led to him being able to do other things. But he had other ventures. I read his biography from his one of his I think his granddaughter. What you mentioned is that, like, he tried to start a soda company, tried to start these other things, and it didn't go. I mean, there were internal problems, but there was also other people who were like, nah, we're not gonna help you do that. Like, right over there doing that other thing. You know what I mean?
Right. We're now, sometimes I don't like to use him as an example, but I think it's relevant just for this conversation. When everyone's like, look at what Jay did, look at what Yeezy did, and they're billionaires. Yeah, I mean, they're using global capital. They're not using their own money, right? And I'm not saying, I learned as a 14-year-old, you use other people's money, right? Dame Dash doesn't agree, but most other people do. Like, they're using global capital. So the people that you're talking about that are these billionaires, Robert Johnson, when he became the wealthiest Black man in America, these are all people using global context. So when they're creating wealth, they're not just using Black money. They may have been doing something originally that related to Black folks somewhat exclusively. But relatively soon after that, they started accessing other capital. So it's almost like, be careful what you wish for, right? Be careful if you want the idea, the utopia of kind of Black Wall Street, right? The flip side is, you couldn't do what you do now.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So at the time, when that was out of necessity, right? We created Black banks because we had to, because white folks wouldn't take our money. Like, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have Black banks. Far from the truth. That's not what I'm saying. But let's just understand the context and the times that things were done before we start to foster, like, if we only get back to that time, we'd be okay.
Yeah, and the other part of the rub with like that, and anything that's a data point. I'm not a professional contrarian, but I am a professional. Tell me a little bit more about this particular data point you throwing out, and like, how did they derive that information? Are we sure this information is accurate? Why? Especially when the primary person that is always followed by a sales pitch is hey, so we're gonna start the so and so co-op, and we're gonna buy this house, we're gonna turn this building into an international global so and so, right? And sometimes, you know, even if it's a little bit of hyperbole, I'm not mad at somebody having a broad and expansive vision, right? However, after I hear the vision, right, we got to look into the nuts and the bolts and to see does this survive scrutiny? Does this plan, you know, work? You know, as a term I've come familiar with, at least in terms of development, is the concept: does it pencil?
Right.
Right? You telling me we're gonna do this? All right. Well, where are the numbers? Right? But specifically with this number that you know, and the brothers get into it in the video, you know, in a depth that I would rather folks go check that out. Right? So I'm gonna put the link to that in the show notes. You know, we're in question like the people who primarily foster this idea usually, you know, it's like Black Chamber of Commerce, you know, my man, Pyronomics, what's my guy, Claude Anderson.
Claude Anderson,
You know,
yeah.
you know, like I mean, I rock with some of what Claude got to say. Some stuff Claude got to say. I'm like, I don't know, Claude. You might be going a little, you know, you might be pushing a little, you know, you might be castigating your own people a little bit. You know, which sometimes, you know, we all need to get tuned up every once in a while. You know, ain't nothing better than getting the old head to ask you something where you thought you were smart, and you be like, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. All right, let me go back to that. Oh, hey, you're right. You got me on that one. Like you got me.
Right.
You know what I mean? That is a part of the culture, and it's a good thing. But it's like this idea gets thrown out, and I look at it a lot of times in the concept that does this help you to start to figure out how to build whatever it is you're trying to do, or the idea out to get to some level of like, you know, actual operational, you know, reality. You know what I mean? Like if you tell someone, well, you know, oh man, we got $100 million in this, and it's like, all right, well, let's go do this other thing. Let's start selling chocolate chip cookies. You know what I mean? Now, a cookie business might be a great business. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of how much money we got, just because people like chocolate chip cookies, right? So you know, there's no shortage of people that start a business on something that people already like, and you just get it to them in a better way, right? But the general thing, and I think the bigger theme of the conversation is, you know, generally this idea that like changing business alone, changing our financial literacy alone, changing you know, one factor in a multi-factor complicated reality that is life is suddenly going to, you know, that's going to open the floodgates, and that's going to be it. You know what I'm saying? You know, and there's a lot of folks who, you know, quite frankly, I mean, as a not as negative as the particular individual whose name, you know, she gonna get Voldemort status on this show, so her name will not be mentioned. But she has made herself sort of in this last 5 years, I think, the prominent, like, I'm the black person that says crazy things about black people, and then people like me for it. That individual, not to that degree, right, of coming at your own people, you know, really for your own personal profit and movement. But there's a cottage comfortable industry going. Basically, this is all your fault that your family can't get out of this generational poverty. You know what I'm saying? Or at least not in full, right? Like y'all you got certain family members that might dealing with money. You know, they may have, you know, good job. They you know, they went, you know, got whatever their skill or trade profession, you know, and have been able to establish a comfortable, you know, functional life, and can help do things right that need to be done,
Right.
take care of the well-being of the family. But the idea that like the rest of y'all can't get there because you're too busy, you know, buying fancy sneakers and trying to look wealthy when you're not wealthy, or because you don't really care about us enough, so therefore you want to go, you know, like all of the things that we say, you know, which echo to the idea of, you know, oh, you're lazy, or you're this, or you're that, you're shiftless, you don't care about anything important, you don't have future plans, you don't think long term. Like you know, you did the brain dump list of all the ones you hear about people, and then you go, that ain't true though. Like, yeah, we got, just like any other community and any other group of people, there's people that are not doing well, and it's maybe interpersonal circumstances. But on the large scale, like folks is trying to work the best way they can, and to assert that, oh well, if we just, you know, we still have to buy black, man. We just gotta buy it from the black store, and that's all it's gonna take. You know what I mean? And that, you know, reality is how many things in the history of this country are able to flourish because of the largesse of either, the open capital market or the federal government backing something to allow the capital market to feel comfortable to give you the money to then do this other thing. Whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? If it's from National Institutes Health Research money that undergirds all scientific research in the United States.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then, then there's a cascade, right? Because like they can get this initial work done. The scientists that, dedicate their life to being a researcher and studying some nuanced piece of information they can all stay in their lane. And then this other, eventually you get to where there's a capital, there's a product produced. Right.
Well, I mean, so there's a couple things with this real quick. One, if you start to look at the areas that Black folks are doing better in the country, you arrive at Black folks are doing better in the DMV area, generally speaking, than almost everywhere else in the country.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an accident. It's the same reason that white folks in the DMV are doing really well and doing better than almost everyone else in the country. It's because of the government. The federal government is a gift that keeps on giving, right? Like, why is Silicon Valley Silicon Valley? To your point, defense contracts.
Yeah, they don't want to talk about that, though.
And then it's spun out. I mean, that is part of what made that. That is, I mean, there's no other, that is what it is. It was defense contracts, and then the defense contracts propositioned it as a business investment for rich people from across the country, including Pittsburgh, was one of the first investors in Hewlett-Packard and in Silicon Valley, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what that was, right? And the other part of it is we're working on the guaranteed income conversation that you just were saying. And what you find when you look at the data is people spend more money on the things that they don't have.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they need more Hennessy. They need more savings. It's not that they need more cigarettes. They need more food. So you just see that even in that, when you give people a base or you give people more support to do what they do, they don't go and spend it in these ways. And it's part of this really insidious concept in American society where you look at the individual, the collective, and the kind of like macro world. And you say, okay, well, individually, we all know people who don't spend money in ways that you would say are advantageous to their personal growth,
Mm-hmm.
right? Their financial growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you start to say, well, there's this group of people and they all got the same color, right? And if you give them money, here's how they're going to spend it. They like Cadillac so much, they will buy a Cadillac before they do this, right? And then you start to break that out. Like, well, even if you assume that, what has happened to all of those people, unless you think that it's internal in those people that they are predisposed to Cadillacs, right?
Right.
Unless they're predisposed to Douce and Cadillacs and Jordans. What happened to these groups of people that is happening all across the country? That means it's a social phenomenon. But instead of taking responsibility for the social phenomena that produced any causes, people look at the symptom, and even the perceived symptom, not the actual data around the symptom, right? The perceived symptom of the cause or the imagined symptom, and then assert a kind of a reality about it. So again, it's like this idea that if I just didn't buy this bottle of alcohol, I could put it in a savings account and do this and do that and do that. The challenge for that is, so could everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, theoretically, if you just didn't do something you liked to do, you could save more money. But no one castigates you for doing that because you're not poor. You know what I mean?
Right. You don't get evaluated negatively if you as we know, the largest transfer of federal largesse to everyday people is the home income tax credit for paying a mortgage, right? So
right.
In return for paying a monthly bill on a giant loan, what I'm saying, I get get some love off my taxes, and that number goes that even on your first mortgage, man, it as big as the house is as big as the break. You know what I'm saying? So it ain't like they go, oh well, is that that's your first crib, that's the number that you are getting off your income tax, right? So we're not gonna get into the cascading effects of buying stuff bigger than maybe you need to have it at this moment in time, but it is a part of that conversation and the conceptuality that you got to meet a certain moral criteria, so to speak, to be worthy of help. I mean, what that goes, that goes back to the early 1800s in the underpinnings of sort of like charitable entities, at least in the Western world, or whatever, that only those who were of a certain level of fitness were worthy or should be helped, or folks that we felt were, I think the concept was like feeble, or there was a name for it, and so I'm trying to fish it out of my brain. Can't get it right now. It was somewhere in there, but basically the only persons that were considered that should receive support were those who were considered either in some way, how do you say, innately less intelligent,
Right.
you know what I'm saying, weaker physically, and then in every other way, which turned into all sorts of sexist and racist ideas about women, men that were not white, largely, you know what I mean.
Right.
And then that still undergirds a lot of our ideas about who is worthy of support. But not to go too far into that, back to how that links into most people, even with these stimulus checks, I'm sure some people, got their stimulus check, bought something maybe that one could from the outside go, well, why do you need that? You know what I mean? But there's an aspect of, most of the time folks have a pretty good read on what they need, right? Some people are going to maybe make a choice that does not look like a good choice, right? Until you get into the context and you ask them, well, why? Like, why did you want to get this? Well, and they may have like, well, I'm actually doing this. I'm trying to help my son with his confidence. Or I'm trying to do this because we never had one of these, and if we get one of these, maybe the kids can practice, like with a computer, or replacing a car, or moving to a different neighborhood so you get access to a different school. Like, there's lots of complicated stuff that folks have a reason why they're doing something, and it may not jive with the pathway to the outcome that you, living in a different circumstance, would assume. But generally, we also know that this business of making these things about these personal failings of these individuals is largely about keeping just those political concepts and policy concepts from getting to life, by triggering and signaling to the people who would vote the other way, like, look, they want to go buy lobster with their food stamps. They should be getting the most cheapest, nastiest food you can get since you're on food stamps.
As if lobsters are really, that's a whole nother conversation. Yes. As if they're really that expensive. As if that's not a propped up, created thing by the New England economy. I mean, good job, New England.
Way to go. Way to go. Great repositioning.
Yeah, if I could frame to sell you something that I found for $1 and sell it to you for $25 a pound, I would do it too. Yeah. No, I think and the final thing I say about that, I know we need to transition to the other side of it, is, that's cool, but it's one thing when you personally think something. It's another thing when you start to make that policy, right? When the policy objective reflects what you think about people versus reflects a kind of broader vision of what it is. So if the policy context of America has been, we will reward you for paying off a huge loan because we think this is a part of what makes America America. But then other people don't deserve things because if we give you too much, you will waste it, right? So we're paying people for participation. Basically, it's paying for participation trophy, right? You get a huge interest, you get a huge deduction because you're playing in the American game.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you got to ask the question, where does that come from, and why should that be policy? Like, why would that be something that then other people, when you get resources, it's very limited where you can spend it, how you can spend it, right? When because America is basically a consumer economy, that's what it's based on, as we see during this time, right? During quarantine, why wouldn't you just give people more money to spend? Because the reality of it is, the more money you put in the street, so to speak, to use a street term, the more money you put in the street, the more people are going to spend it. The only people who are not going to spend the money that they have are really rich people. Because they already got money.
Right. They cool. They like, I got it.
They cool. They don't need nothing else. So therefore, if people who need other things, and frankly, even if you assume that was the case, if people who need other things, if they get money, they're going to spend it. Some variation of it, not all of it. They're going to spend those things that are important to them.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean, or things that matter. Versus, if you give a tax break to an extremely wealthy person, they're not going to spend a dime. They're already rich,
right. And they already have a plan. More than likely, that like, oh yeah, if we don't put that money in that, we put it over there.
Yeah, there gets to a point where if you give me an extra. If you give me extra $20, right? I might spend that. But if you give me an extra $2,000, I'm not going to spend it. Yeah. At some point, I'd run out of shit to buy.
Like the crib with all the air fryers and just egg.
At some point, you just run out of egg and oat milk. Like, what do you think? You go buy it like some sort of hoarder? Like I'm just gonna be holding things of just egg and all kind of Beyond Burgers sitting in a big freezer? I'm just going to save it. I'm going to save it and invest it and have it make money for me. But I'm not going to put it back in the consumer economy, which is really the underlying thing of the American society functioning the way it does. Because now we see what happens when people can't spend money. We see what happens, right? And we're going to have a conversation in the next 3 weeks to a month on giving people a base income, even if they're not working.
Yeah.
Right? Which is the whole conversation. This whole time. Everyone has debated, can you give somebody money? The federal government gave people a stimulus check just for working. Just if you're doing anything, if you're a participant, we give you some extra money.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it for everybody in America under a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you really think about if you want to prop up the economy? But the other thing I wanted to ask about was the second one that I sent you, and it was from Mayor Baraka. And it was from him, and he was at the ending of a session that was put together by Dr. Ron Daniels.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, kind of luminaries from the progressive black and brown community from all across the country. Ras, who was the mayor of Newark, came on to give the ending
statement, like a speech.
Ending statement. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting. So I wanted to get your take on it. Like, maybe talk a little bit about what he was talking about and get your take on it, because I think it did also have a connection to the prior one, right? The reason I sent it was its connection to the prior one. And so we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, and that's why I thought it was right on in terms of even in this moment, right? Even though that speech happened last year, and then that other conversation was just this month. The because the essential thing that stood out for me that Ross was speaking to was that, because that panel was about gentrification and neighborhood, gentrification, right? So when we start talking about that, and you're talking about capital forces, you're talking about policy decisions, all these things that create the circumstances where someone's space, can be gentrified, right? But the thing that stood out to me that Ross jumped into was one, if you are that if you're going to change a dynamic in your space, like people have to be willing to like get together about it, right? I think the phrase he started out with saying, my enemies are our enemies, our enemies, our friends are our friends, our allies are our allies, right? And that if me and you exist in community in a sense, right, and we see each other as alike in that way, right, and connected in that way, that if we're going to find a way to change the circumstances that will exist around us, we have to have the willingness to struggle with each other around our ideas, right? And this one, I think, ties right into that, because a part of that money conversation is this is also, when we get into the internal dynamics of Black class struggle and one person sees it this way, and you can go to any Black neighborhood in America right now, and there's an old head, male or female, or may show up otherwise in terms of the gender dynamics, but there's an old head on that block who, if you go ask them about the block, will give you the business on how everybody else fucked up the neighborhood and they ain't leaving. Right. And that person is not necessarily wrong. They're not totally right in that, that the neighborhood got fucked up due to just the personal idiosyncrasies of their neighbors. But they do have a clear point of view of look, I always take care of my place. And when we was trying to do this over here, this came up last year in when Nipsey passed and folks was going, was murdered, I should say, pardon me. That the people were like, yeah, man, why can't everybody do it like Nipsey, do this like Nipsey? I'm like, look, there's a person in your community that's probably been fighting to try to get enough people behind certain ideas to develop things in your space. You don't know them though. Or maybe you didn't listen to them, or maybe they get on your nerves the way they go about it, right? So he got into these couple different things. One was organizing, right? And that's I think the key thing of, and it's something that I even reach to now when, being in a different place than I was, and especially at this moment with folks in the street, is to go, hey man, who's the point person for this, these current movements with the younger people, and then who's their squad, right? And how could, where I'm at in life, how can I be an aid to them? Because my particular way to show up is not to be in the street right now, right? That in that way, you know what I'm saying? I could be, I might do some actions and some walks, some other things, but that is not the best way I can serve the process change. But the idea that if you want to get something done in your own community, but you don't need to start no organization, you don't need to study around processes and policies and systems of doing things, you don't need to have a challenging conversation about, all right, man, if you get the thing we asking for, if these people can give it to you, how are we going to make it work afterwards? Right. And to commit to I'm willing to sit in the room and struggle with you. Anybody that when I go and do community and civic actions that I'm involved in, that we appear to be oppositional. My thing is to go, hey man, can me and you talk? Because if you have ideas about this that I don't understand, and I have ideas about it that you think either you don't understand or you think are wrong, if we can get together and commit to engaging each other, one, we will find out that both of us need to do some improvement, right? But also, I firmly stand on the idea that we can get to an idea of what to make happen that it reflects a deliberative process and outcome, and not just a, well, I see it this way, and the only way we can do it is through market rate housing building, and then we're going to do mixed commercial on the bottom. That's the only way to redevelop this neighborhood, and we're going to get, the other people. It's like, nah, man, we got to have a willingness to be creative, a willingness to be challenging. There's a couple other points, I don't want to suck them all up that he brought up in the piece, but also was the idea of operational unity, and that we may have differing philosophies about where this vision is going to go into the unexperienced future. But if some part of this is not, let's not blow up each other's, planning meetings. Let's, come over here, bring some of your people, bring some of our people. Let's talk about why we different, where we different. Now we might get to a space where we go, yeah, we can't work together on this part, but also I'm not going to stop you from making your moves where you making your moves. Do your thing, and then we'll do this. You know what I mean? It was very tying in to me to this money conversation because the backdrop of all that, especially when we start talking about gentrification and sustainable, growth and development of the places that people live. There's a concept of that you need people that are willing to do the legwork to set up the environment and know the space and know the people and figure out if a neighborhood is going to change, that the people who live there benefit and not that it's just a benefit to the next person's that's coming, but that the people who are already there get the benefits of this change because the world changes. That's it. The river flows down from the mountain and the side and the banks are never the same. That's just reality. However, you can do things to ensure that, not sure, that's a strong word. People can be involved in a different way to make it more likely that they benefit from the outcomes, and that level of empowerment. And so, but the money conversation usually ends up just being a bludgeon, right? Because without large scale capital investment on many things, if you want a full, substantial, 6-month change in the live dynamic of Black people at large, it ain't gonna happen just by everybody learning how to set up a some sort of stock investment savings account, and you're gonna save 25% of your income, and then you're gonna do this, and then suddenly that ain't at large, that ain't gonna work. There ain't enough savings to go around to meet that sort of change, and so those were some of the first points, and that stuck out to me that Roz was adding on, and how I saw them connecting to this current, that conversation and this current movement of the things we're talking about: defunding police forces, talking about reinvesting in community, talking, all of these things. People saying they stand with us, you know what I'm saying, in terms of corporate people. You know what I mean? I got a whole thing I've been writing about that a bit. But One Love, the Uber said they stand with me. I still don't know what that means, Uber, wherever you at.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying?
And y'all need to support this podcast.
Tell the brothers, show me some evidence that you stand with me. You know what I mean? And so that's where I go. Look, what were some of your thoughts, guys?
I mean, shared many of yours. What I'll say is, I think, what stuck out to me was this idea that we agree on 10 things. Of 10 things, we agree on 8 of the 10 things, but we'll cancel each other because of our disagreement about the 2, which I think is just an incredibly unsophisticated concept of the world. When countries are debating each other, countries can participate in treaties, frankly, while on the other side avidly not supporting the same things. But what we agree on, we agree on. What we don't, we don't. So it's sometimes this idea of the current landscape of many of the kind of foundational points that people will say are like very laden with, I don't want to, if I say emotion, but I'll just say like a lot of passion. So it's almost like, if you're not, like, silence is violence, right? There could be a lot of reasons people aren't saying something. That doesn't mean they're trying to be violent towards somebody. Yeah. But if one of your fundamental organizing premises, silence is violence, you're only going to be able to connect with people who think exactly like you. Yeah. And then you have to ask the question to yourself, how many people in the world think exactly like you? And you'll find a relatively small amount of people. Yeah. There are a lot of people who share some of the broader interests you have, right? And I think, what we've talked about often is that mass mobilization is not mass organization. We've seen really good mass mobilization in the world. It remains to be seen to talk about organization, right? And the organization is much more complicated. So when we start by saying, if you disagree with any of my 10 premises, that we can't come together on the thing that we share, it means that many of the movements that have been really good at mobilizing do not become good at organizing and making collective change on the 8 things that we care about together. Which stops it, because those who don't like any of the 10 things you support are just waiting for it to break down. They're waiting for the connections to break. They're waiting for the mobilization never to turn into organization, right? So that's one thing. And then 2, how he talked about like organization. Like he said, listen, I got an organization and I'm not ashamed of it. Right. Because I can use that to make things happen for the benefit of my people. When I was sitting, frying chicken, trying to get people to support me, versus now I can make real the changes I care about and put things into really put things into mobilization. And I think that sometimes our people are scared of power from a structural context. They're not scared of power when it comes from a advancing or kind of agitational context, but scared of power from a holding it and then having to like maintain it and engage with other people around the maintenance of it. Yeah. Well, and
if I could just add too around that organization piece, because I think I wonder sometimes if folks, when they started, when I think it was in that, or it might have been in the other piece where it was like basically when you do pivot to, I think it was actually somewhere in there when I watched the whole drawing. And the brother said, like, sometimes when folks pivoted to going into, direct political action, like some folks view that as selling out from the revolution, so to speak, right?
Right.
And it's like, nah, like I have to do something, right? To continue to advocate for position and for these ideas. Like you have to have a body. A body has to hold your ideas and your concepts and keep them going. Like,
right.
And it gets into that thing, and I think kind of back to that silver bullet thinking when we started with the money piece, that you will, like, we'll get these demands, and then the fight for the life we want will be over. Like there'll be no, like, the rest of the human history will just be like that. And it's like, no, actually the way this goes is you fight to get things a certain way for you and yourself and your people. And then if you get all those things, or you get most of those things, you're going to want some different things at some point in the future. You're going to need some different things at some point in the future. Like the world is not actually static. There's not a like endpoint to the whatever the change is, whether it's political change, whether it's a direct economic change, whatever. Like it, even in a relationship, like y'all, well, we barely knew each other. Now we know each other so much better. We got together. We had our first kid. Like every step of the way, you had to wake up the next day and reestablish why we do this with each other. You know what I'm saying? Like it doesn't just end because you get the demands that you want. You know what I mean? And then you got to sometimes look at the paper and be like, well, we had 10 on this sheet. Look like we can get 7 of these, man. Should we just grab these 7 and, we'll work on these? And, some people will tell you, no, we won't stop till we get all 10 of them. And that's not necessarily wrong. And some people will be like, I mean, I don't want to not stop because I don't want all 10, but I do have this other thing I need to take care of, and I'm going to pull away. Right? Either I'm going to consciously pull away, or I'm going to subconsciously pull away. And I think that power is sustained by having, a unit. It's not sustained by just one person. I even just a 10, and we didn't talk about this, but I was thinking about it, because when we will throw out this idea, we don't got no leaders like we had. And I started thinking about it, I was like, because we frame MLK and Malcolm X as like the 2 leaders of these 2 pillars of all Black thought. And then I'm like, were they actually experienced like that by Black people at the time?
Right.
And I don't think so. I mean, I think they were seen as national leaders, but so was A. Philip Randolph. So was, Medgar Evers. So were various different local people in people's cities who was the person maybe that was out there making moves. You know what I mean? Not to mention all of the Black women that don't get mentioned by people.
Right. I was about to say Fannie Lou Hamer. That's right. That's right.
Fannie Lou, man. Like, so it, to me, it's like interrogating this idea and this structural concept around how we make change for ourselves and what power we hold. And it frustrates me at times when it'd be like, well, we ain't gonna lead. It's like, well, you out here, you got me to come to the meeting. So you a leader. If you didn't know.
Right.
Like they told me what you was doing, like, and I showed up to add on. Because you
like a top down. See, the thing is like everyone likes a top down. They like the idea of a top down structure until they have to be a part of the accountability and responsibility to the top down structure.
Yeah.
Because again, after that, once you say that we've created an organization, you got to pay these dues. Yeah, you have to, as Mayor Barack would say, struggle together to debate what is our platform. Mm-hmm. Right? We got to get on this, and we got to get on the same page about things to have a common thrust. Right? And so it can be easier to want this idea of leadership, but then also the other side of that equation is when you talk about a lot of the organizations who did have leadership and did have paid people who go across the country, obviously a lot of it was supported by the Black church, but a lot of it was supported by white philanthropy.
Yeah.
The same, frankly, some of the same white philanthropy that's still supporting stuff to this day that many of us interrogate and castigate. Now, whether you want to take their money or not, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? However, like you do have to have some form of structure of how your system is going to work. And that means you have to come together and agree and struggle together. But you also have to just understand, to your point about cities, right? Cities are things in motion. They have never stayed the same. There's not one part of a city in America that has remained only one group of people for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
No, there's not one in America, because that's not how things function. People leave, people go, people change. Now obviously with Black folks, there's often this idea of erasure, right? Which makes neighborhood change and shifting for us a little different than everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's about, like, we were told to go somewhere else or forced to go somewhere else. But places don't stay the same. So when Baraka was talking about how he tries to access the fact that, people with money, not just white folks, but people with money want to live downtown, right, in Newark.
Mm-hmm.
That you want to utilize and access those resources of people wanting to live downtown to then put money into the South Ward, put money into the West Ward, put money into the North Ward, because the folks who are from Newark don't want to move downtown. That's not where they want to be. They're used to being in their neighborhoods. So you're leveraging the resources of folks wanting to move downtown to be able to utilize the money to make the improvements, the improvements, and to have the city have the resources to do stuff.
Yeah.
Well, then people will also blame you, say, why are you letting all them white folks move downtown? Right? It ain't just white folks, because the reality of it is, if you Black and want to move, and you're young and Black and move to Newark, if you don't know Newark, why would you move
right
to
any neighborhood
to, like, the South Ward?
that you don't know
like,
nobody or don't know how it functions, don't know nothing about it? Like,
yeah, why would you move to Drayton Street? Like, okay, yeah, so I just got to this town and now I'm going to move to, the North Ward, not know anything about it. No, they're going to want to live downtown, because that's, generally speaking, where they're going to work. Or if you're an executive and come into a city, you're going to want to live downtown because that's where you work at. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Sometimes we've castigated even this idea of wanting to not have to go 5 miles between where you work and where you live. For some people, that is totally okay. For some people, that's not. They want to do something different, right? That's not inherently wrong, because they want to do that. So, but like you said, like, we're utilizing, accessing those resources. Let's use the change to benefit those who need the extra resources. But when you castigate doing anything around tax abatements or, subsidies that usually states frame you're going to get anyway. A lot of times people don't know that abatements on taxes for developers, those are state mandates. Right? They're not local mandates. Cities write them in, but states actually usually frame those, right? So, but again, it's about how do you frame it to move on behalf of a people. And if there's a thing in the public square where you debate these concepts, then you can debate the concepts, but you can't debate a theoretical concept versus a practical concept. And that's often where we get into as well.
Yeah.
Like, are we debating what you think is going to happen when you do something? Or are you debating what we know that thing will do when you do it? And if you're accountable for people, you have to have another kind of conversation for yourself. And I think the last thing I'll say about that, just is like he said, like, you have to study. And I know that we're in a generation that, for a lot of different reasons, spending a lot of time reading isn't cool. And people have become more visual learners, so they'll, like, watch people. But the thing about when you watch somebody talk, it obscures the time and effort that they spent researching.
Right. The thought.
They don't tell you the thought they came. They don't tell you what books they read. So you're just taking what we called way back in the day, the Cliff Notes, right? You're essentially, when we watch a TED Talk, you're taking the Cliff Notes. You're not drilling down into anything specific, right?
Right.
You're taking the high level stuff they share, where they have 14 minutes to share with you something they've been studying for the last 5 years.
And then you can walk away like, I know this now. And it's like, no, you know about this now. Like, to know this, you're going to go wrestle with it. You need to go, like, look at some of that person's sources and maybe try to tell somebody else what you think you know, because you're going to be, when you try to tell somebody else, you're going to be like, well, actually, you know what? Wait, let me go. I got to go read some more, because I'm not 100% sure.
Right, like, do you accept all their sources? Yeah. You know what I mean? Do you accept their sources as correct? Because sometimes you might hear something good someone said, and they're doing something based on someone else's premise, but you might investigate that premise and have a challenge with that premise. So you have to study movements to actually identify long term what worked and what didn't. Now, there's always a space for the creativity of the current space to do something unique. But in the long tail of history, there's not much unique. In the specifics, yes, there are unique things. Like we're using social media, so there are unique things that are occurring because you could never get that many people out to do something without having to send them a letter or talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long term of what's occurring or what change is going to come out of something, history is pretty consistent.
Yeah.
So that's just where I think the last thing of like, how do you, like study? It doesn't mean you have to be a quote unquote open adherent to what you studied if you don't agree. But it means that you evaluated what did occur. You evaluate the ideas that were out there. And then if you have a different perspective today, why you have a different perspective today. You have made an agreement, and made a decision. So I just think that was the other thing I really pulled out of that.
Yeah. And I wanted to touch on that because I did actually appreciate, it was right out of my playbook because Ross was like, "Look, man, y'all acting like y'all. I've been in this. Like I'm from this. Like I'm from this place. From my father to my mother. Like, even my moms don't always agree with me. We got to fight around our ideas, but we love each other. Like in that, basically, very kin to our own nature. Like, look, man. Like if you think what I'm saying is smart or whatever, it ain't just because I'm magically smart. I works on this. I'm in these books.
Right.
I'm wrestling with ideas. I'm talking to other people. I'm getting in challenging dialogues about stuff. We going into the weeds on matters and issues, and that has to be a part of what happens here, right? And for our community and for our people, it's not a foreign concept necessarily, but it is something I think in the modern, the external thing for all people. I think that our conservative brothers sometimes will articulate this idea that folks are not actually open to debate, and that's why that's been their pivot concept to wedge in ideas. But often they're not willing to actually engage you in debate about it either. Like they also too want you to just kind of shut up and accept their idea and move on, right? And then we've got to this place in our public dialogue. Or the only time we public debate about something is letting you say it uncontested. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And my thing is, no. You go ahead and say what you're going to say. If there's something to be contested, though, I'm going to say what I got to say. And then we're going to go back and forth, right? And then we can decide, how we're going to treat each other in terms of our basic humanity along with that. We do not have to, be disparaging or uncaring with each other, unless, some of your ideas are particularly vile and, they cannot be allowed to live. But, that's for another conversation. So I think that was, and I want to, I think we can return to some of this, in a future dialogue, because I think there's a weave in here around like, if you want something to change, you want something happening in development of people's space, I think is all going to be, and especially in this moment, because the other thing that's been revealed by this moment is how much of the reservations or the things that people signed off on. Okay, well, I'm gonna live in an apartment this size. I'm staying in this neighborhood, or because I can access these other things. But now, after those things are no longer available due to a wholesale change in the way our society functions due to a global pandemic, it's like, oh, well, what do I do? How do we do now, right? So we can come back to that in the future. So I wanted to, if it's okay with you, pivot.
Sure. Yeah.
As it were, because it's something else, which, based on the title that I ultimately put on here, when you, the listener, hear this, you're gonna be like, man, I thought they was gonna get to this part earlier. So the third thing you shared with me this month, there was an 80s, I guess, Coachella, right? In the concept of this concert, in 3 days, and the luminaries that would perform there, and to come up with. So are we looking to? Are we looking? Give me a rundown what you'd like me to do, because I have some interrogating thoughts about the list itself that I want to get to, and then I can get to trying to put together my own, what would be my punch card, so to speak. My punch card, I guess.
My thing with the 80s Coachella, I mean, obviously it was kind of, and I wouldn't say it was thrown together, because I would argue that probably, depending on your experience of the 80s, right, and how you experienced all the music and maybe what age you were, you would have a different perspective. Like, I think a lot of us who came up in the mid to late 80s, or were younger in the mid to late 80s, but were influenced by our parents, would put certain people together because of the context that we heard the music. Mm-hmm. But I guess it is similar to Coachella. Like, they'd be like, okay, well, Friday we got this guy, Saturday we got this woman, Sunday we got this group, and you're like, damn, I just want to see Friday. I just want to see them three together, and they're like, no, you got to come and see the other stuff too, right? So, I mean, just the idea, and just to give context for folks, so they had the 80s Black Coachella. So Friday is, kind of headlined by Diana Ross, Tina Turner, Janet Jackson, and Whitney Houston. Right. But they're also, I would be remiss if I didn't share that they also got on there Phyllis Hyman, Anita Baker, man. You know what I mean? Roberta Flack and Stephanie Jones, right? Stephanie Mills, right? But they're the openers, right? Well, I know, which for us is a huge challenge, right? then I just run through them, and then you give your perspective. Then you got Saturday. The opener is kind of like the headliner is Prince, Sade, Donna Summer, Earth, Wind, and Fire. But it also is important to see here the folks that they got underneath there: Atlantic Starr, Angela Bofield, Patti LaBelle, the SOS Band, and Rick James, right? Again, I know.
I didn't even notice Patty was down there.
Yeah, Patty's in Saturday.
Who gonna tell Patty she gotta wait till?
I know.
I ain't going to tell Patty she on the third line. You go tell Patty. I ain't telling Patty.
Man, I ain't never seen no place with Patti LaBelle make the third line. And then last we got, Sunday you got Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, Dionne Warwick, Luther Vandross. But again, it's important to understand underneath here, you got all the Jacksons and Jermaine Jackson.
Right, somebody put Jermaine Jackson out separate. I don't even know why that happened. He don't belong on there.
Listen, man, I think it really depends on how as you would say, how you showed up in like 82, 83 with that do what you do when you did what you did to me. Like when he was going to be the next star in Motown because he married Barry Gordy's daughter. He did, he was going to be the superstar.
It's Jermaine's
moment.
You know what I mean? Jermaine's moment.
Yeah.
It was like, no,
Michael was whatever. Jermaine's the real truth. Oh, no. And then, because Jermaine, here's my thing, at the end of the day, talent is talent. I respect all of them. Jermaine ain't had Quincy Jones.
No. Yeah, he did.
So at the end of the day, you can say what you want. Homie he ain't have him. So, he had whoever they had at Motown at that time. No disrespect to them. But down there, you got Teddy Pendergrass, Whispers, the Gap Band. So for me, I just chose Saturday. And I chose Saturday just because I thought of the broad scope of people that, if I went to go see, and if someone said, here's a show, and the fact they had Prince headlining, I'm not the hugest Prince fan, but obviously I'm a Prince, I like Prince. But then they had Sade and Earth, Wind, and Fire. And then for me was the, like that actually just solved it all for me.
God, they got Rick James on Saturday.
Listen, man. Look. And Angela Bofield. And Kent, listen.
Rick Crazy's all get out, props, he ain't with us no more. But I mean, that's at least I can hear the songs playing in my head right now. Where at a concert, you check it out. You know what I'm saying? Like,
you checking your head, but clapping their hands all fast.
His shoulders is moving like.
Shoulders moving like, give it to me, baby.
So, let me give you.
See, there you think, you always think that Tina Marie gonna come out. That's the other
right. She might pop up at any moment because Rick James is there. So over under, how many of the way this is written out? How many times will people think the concert's over because of the way the person that's on stage, oh well.
Oh man, I mean,
concert flow. So, I don't know. I thought it was over. Like it's like, wait, no, it's not. She just, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even think you can say
Saturday. I would say Friday is probably the Friday. See, I don't know because you get Janet Jackson, then Tina Turner. So, because if you got, you know what I'm saying, like First of all, you got Grace Jones, Evelyn Champagne King, Anita Baker, and Phyllis Hyman on the bottom. So you just had a Budweiser Superfest or what's the name at the Man Theater or some of Madison Square Garden. You had the thing at the Dell right there. Nigga, what? Phyllis Hyman and Anita Baker.
We're gonna be right here all day with the folding chairs
man,
out.
You get there at 2 o'clock. Right. Yeah, that's that. You get there at 2 o'clock with the coolers. You know what I'm saying? You got you a couple beds. Brothers got some sandals on because you know what I'm saying. They want their feet to breathe because it's gonna be all day. You know what I'm saying? Like or the weaved weaved shoe.
All right, you got the weaved
shoe. They're covering most of the foot, but you know what I'm saying? Like man,
out there. Yeah, this is. Yeah, I mean, like I actually, and then I can't even. I don't even want to try to get into trying to think about who's not on the show, right? Because you, but like. You know, you go to. I went with the third day because because Stevie Wonder. I'm like, well, I got Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson, like two. You know what I mean? The same day. That's kind of ill. You know what I'm saying? But then for Mariah Carey sang. And then is Lionel Richie coming just as Lionel Richie, or the Commodore is going to show up?
Again, you always got to keep it open for the possibilities.
You know what I'm saying? Like, ain't nobody bring that up. You know what I'm saying? The Whisperers going to have them suits on and shit. Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy, and then you got Peebo. People done cut Peebo off a little bit, but motherfucking Peebo gonna be in there with the that's Al Wilson. But the other song, he did a version of it.
But see, the thing about Peebo Bryson is, again, I think depending on your context of the 80s, like my aunt, who's 10 years older than me, when I was 7, 6, and 7 and 8, there was nothing but Peebo Bryson posters up in her room. Like, because if you really think about that time, and people, again, like to your point about this stuff, people's memories are different.
Yeah.
Prince was still moving his way into the mainstream of Black America in the early 80s. Now, we want to receive it differently, right? But Prince was still hitting them with the Minneapolis androgynous play, right?
Yeah. Everybody, like people agreed it was good, but everybody didn't totally. Everybody wasn't totally on board.
I would argue it took until after Purple Rain, and then when he started doing more slow songs,
like Diamonds and Pearls and
Diamonds and Pearls, Door, Scandalous.
Yeah.
When he started doing that 87, 88, that slow bop, Jack. Yeah, I think that's when people started being like, whoa, we got to deal with Prince a little different. We don't care if he do got his ass out in the in his pants.
Got roughly outfits on. You got to doing.
Yeah, like he got roughly outfits on. Man, this dude is talented, but what I mean? Like I think, again, because like you said about Martin Luther King and Asmi Shabazz, like we like to frame how we see them today with clear eyes, how everybody saw them during that time. And even Michael Jackson was like, he was like a teen heartthrob.
Yeah, at the beginning.
Right? He's like, in the beginning, he was a teen heartthrob. Again, for my aunt and uncle, they weren't like Michael Jackson fans because they were his age. Right? It's like some rap, like, it's almost like you might have a rapper, and then the rapper came up during the time you came up, but like all the people younger than you liked him. You was like, okay, he was cool, but he wasn't like the guy I liked. Mm-hmm. That's how Michael Jackson was in the 80s. Yeah. Again, especially Thriller, I will say. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Now, later again, I think a lot of stuff we tend to look at it differently. Yeah. Or people like them during, what do you call it? Back to
Off the Wall?
To the Wall.
Yeah, Off the Wall. Off the Wall.
Just from a general...
Yeah, because post-Thriller, Thriller is the pivot. You know what I'm saying? When you hit the Thriller, it's like, uh-oh. Like Mike done became Mike now. You know what I'm saying? It's like Michael Jordan winning his first ring, and then everybody, the narrative changes. You know what I'm saying? Like he became Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Like he was Michael Jackson.
No, that's very true.
Michael Jackson.
Right. Michael Jackson.
You know what I'm saying? And then with the the other piece of that with the rise of the music video, that like the destination moment to see what Michael Jackson's about to do next. You know what I'm saying? Like, but none of that exists. It started the 80s and midway through, you ain't necessarily, you like them jams on Off the Wall, but you ain't like, ooh, Michael Jackson coming. Like he gonna be,
and that's what I'm saying. Like because I think again, and some people are going to listen to this, and it's going to sound quote unquote blasphemous, but I'm gonna say it. Remember the Time was kind of like Michael Jackson's comeback song among certain segments of the Black community.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if we just keeping it a bean. Now, there was, people like Liberian Girl, and you know what I mean? Like, there were songs on there, obviously, that and because Black people are not a monolith, right? So I'm not trying to frame it like that. But, like, Remember the Time was like, oh, man, hold on, Mike came, this is hard.
Right.
Like, this is Teddy Riley, Jack. Right. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
Mike
came back.
Like, Mike,
Mike doing this for us.
Because he got these, quite, in pop music being the creation that it is, like, these other things that were like pop things that we might enjoy, but we didn't know. I would say, in my own experience, folks didn't feel like it was like for them, or in their ethic. It was just like, oh, that's a cool song. You know what I mean? Like, what's the one we did, the Moonwalker? Like, Moonwalker was fun. It was good times. There's some jams on the Moonwalker, but I ain't feel like Moonwalker was like.
Yeah, Moonwalker was complicated, man. I'm gonna keep it a bean, man. Moonwalker was like, what the fuck? I mean, it was like, by that time it was a video game. Like, it was younger dudes that, like, I mean, again, he went to the pinnacle of success and respect due to him. And we also judged all these guys differently. We judge Michael Jackson and we judge Hammer differently from going to the pinnacle of pop success, where now folks look to go to the pinnacle of pop success and we don't judge them the same, right?
Yeah.
Which I think has a lot to do with just the change in American society, and that's fine. But all I'm saying is, when people look at Prince and Michael Jackson, like, when Alexander O'Neal came out, it wasn't like you was trying to, like, thinking about, was Prince going to put out a certain kind of ballad. You went to Alexander O'Neal for that ballad, or you know what I'm saying? As the Whispers came out of the 80s and dropped some of their classics, in the early to mid 80s. So, for me, it's always an interesting thing of how, to your point, how you reflect back on this conversation, right? Because this conversation itself makes you reflect back to, like, all right, the Mary Jane Girls. Like, how many songs did the Mary Jane Girls have?
Right. Do I got to watch them without Rick James?
Right. But, you know what I'm saying? And you start, it takes you down this rabbit hole, right? Like, oh, man. Because now that I'm looking and I'm interrogating a little more, like the emotions was done pretty much by the 70s.
Yeah. I would wager that, that more of Dionne Warwick's work that I think of Dionne Warwick, 80s Dionne Warwick, as like Dionne Warwick that she's doing basically like these pop jams with, not necessarily, like, just she was in a different space. Like, my understanding, like, if you really want to get into Dionne Warwick, you gotta go to them 70s joints. You know what I'm saying? 60s, 70s.
Yeah, no, I mean,
different.
No, I think by Dionne, by 80s, she was like, because even the joint she got with Jeffrey Osborne.
Yeah. That's the one I was trying to pull up in my brain.
Yeah, like the one she got with him, that's where Jeffrey Osborne is kind of like, he's the one, right? In fact, that he's not on here is a travesty.
It's a challenge. I'm only human. Don't ask me for too much, too fast. That's right.
Listen, he was giving that shit. Listen, he gave that thing up. He said, listen, let me tell you something. I'm only human.
You know what I'm saying? About here.
Ask for too much, man. You know what I mean? Listen, sis.
You start hitting that. Hey. Start hitting all them on you and shit. Yeah.
Straight up. But yeah, like, so most of her joints, and honestly, well, damn, I'm really interrogating this because Chico wasn't even out in the 90s.
Right.
Because it was the other DeBarge brother, 80s.
Yeah, Chico.
What was the other DeBarge brother?
Well, you got the other group, Switch.
So you got Switch, that was the older brother.
Yeah, the older brother.
I think it was Eddie DeBarge.
Yeah.
That was Eddie DeBarge on Switch.
Yeah, I think somebody might have made this. The time got a little crunch. They like, because Chico was damn near like the back end of the 90s. Like,
Nah.
Chico ain't really.
Yeah, he's mid. No, he's mid. He's after D'Angelo.
Yeah.
And then Lisa Fisher. Yeah, I mean, that's How Can I Ease the Pain, but that's 1990.
Yeah, I don't think
Right?
she's
Like,
on there.
No. Yeah, not with these towers of power.
I mean, you can't ask Sherelle. You gotta ask Sherelle and Alexander O'Neal together, man. I gotta.
So first of all, for me, I just automatically assume that because I'm not listening to nothing about Alexander O'Neal.
Knowing Alexander O'Neal, he was probably showing up anyway. He was like, "What are you doing? You want me to come sing Saturday?" Yes. We're gonna do all the hits.
There's never any question.
Like, you know what I'm saying? It's an ill piece though. It is actually kind of fun to think about because like because I started thinking about like so if I made a punch list of this, so like I've seen as a kid, I was able to see Luther Vandross perform, I was able to see Patti LaBelle perform. I don't know, but I think my mom always talks about Rick James. When Great Adventure used to do concerts, like they used to have like real live concerts, and like that Rick James his concerts that led Great Adventure.
Oh man,
that was the end of that because it was Reefer. It was a whole lot of, you know what I'm saying? It was a lot of wild, like some shit broke out. Like motherfuckers, Great Adventure said, you know what, we ain't doing no more of these kind of concerts. we gonna get these, the canned American, the American Performer Band, which is basically like, a cover review of independent singers, but they got out of the live concert business because Rick James tore that motherfucker out.
I mean, I can't even imagine how you would think that Rick James would come and like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
That was going to end any other kind of way.
But damn, now that you say that, it's another interesting thing on here. It's very interesting who framed 80s Black Coachella, but you didn't, even depending on how you take this, you didn't even have Curtis Blow.
Nah.
Like you don't have any hip hop, right? And so on one level, I think people like you and I could really get into this, but then there is also this part like Eric B. and Rakim or Curtis Blow or Run DMC.
Yeah.
At least
there's no way you do this concert without them, especially if we saying even if we say it's 86. You gotta have Run DMC. You gotta have probably Curtis Blow. You probably got you gotta get at least a couple of them folks. Maybe a UTFO or something.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You gotta Roxanne Shante LL. Yeah. Because even if you were biased against the back end of 80 and 89. Mm-hmm. Let's say you were biased, right? Yeah. Okay, even if you were biased, that means you still, LL was 85, Run DMC was 83 and 84, Curtis Blow being the person that I would argue popularized a certain brand of hip hop, which I know, at one point I want to have this Harlem Bronx conversation again. But you got them. So let's say you don't even want to use Rakim and you don't include Public Enemy? Like, let's be clear. Public Enemy Public Enemy in the 90s had, I guess Welcome to the Terror Dome was 90. Yeah, I guess Welcome to the Terror Dome was 1990. And then
Fight the Power and all that. That's
89, right? 89, Another Summer, right? And so I'm saying It Takes a Nation to Hold Us Back, which is arguably one of the top 5 hip hop albums ever created, if only for the structure and if you think about how you take these samples and put these samples together before, like, you could use them, and before you had to like string them together. So if you're talking about having a conversation on the 80s, to have it without hip hop, again, in some ways, as much as it reflects the joy of our times, it also reflects the whole conversation that you're even saying about some of our generational challenges.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So it's a fun project to kind of dip and engage on. Just to kind of think about those times. But it like most things with Black folks, when you look into start to bring up more questions and answers.
Yeah, right. You like,
like anything to do with your family or anything to do with something, you like, shit, that brought up more questions than it resolved anything.
right.
Like that didn't really help us resolve anything here. Shit.
That's where you just be like, well, I'm gonna go pick up the juice and some cups.
Right.
And then
Like
we'll go ahead and
talk about family.
We'll go ahead and have some dinner. You know what I'm saying? I'll go get the pick up.
Yeah, like that's what people like, man, let's talk about family. And then it's like the people start talking about family. So I'm being, whoa, okay. So we had all the kids here. Maybe that wasn't the conversation we wanted to have today.
Where are we going with this?
Where are we going with this, right? Because there's always somebody in the family like, so what's the next point of this conversation, right? Because again, we sometimes make idols and make myth out of people who were, as Jeffrey Osborne said, I'm only human. Don't ask me for too much, too fast.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, I'm a person of my time.
Absolutely. And I think I was like, somebody just decided. I mean, at that time though, more than likely you might have one rap group maybe that would be together with something like this, but there's no way you could be like, I'm making an 80s black joint like summer concert in 87 and there's not a rap group in there.
And you ain't got heavy D. I mean, come on, how you not gonna have the bum diddly D? You know what I'm saying? Like in Levert. And you ain't got Slick Rick or Dougie Fresh, and you ain't got Levert.
Oh man.
You ain't got Levert, you ain't got Guy. Now that I'm looking deeper, man. Hell no. Hell to the no.
Bump some people out of here, man. It's gonna be a tested. It's gonna be a hot.
Hell yeah,
it's gonna be people popping up. Somebody getting pulled in. Somebody just showing up. They be like, "Yo, what's name is here? Right. Who's here?" Nah,
they gonna make me start. They gonna make me look up the Budweiser Super.
You know what I'm saying? Keith Sweat. I'll be sure, but not Keith Sweat.
That's what I'm saying. New edition. You don't have guys.
We're New Edition.
You don't have Bobby Brown. So how you gonna talk about the 80s and Bobby Brown ain't involved?
It's my
prerogative, Jack. If you want to talk about every little step I take and you're not going to think that don't remind somebody of 1989, then again.
You wasn't alive in that. You wasn't there in 1989. I was there. Yeah. It was all about that Bobby Brown. Like, listen, definitely Bobby before Brown Jermaine by himself. Nobody try to see Jermaine. Jermaine, hold on, Jermaine. Nobody try to see you. They was like, where your brothers at? Your brother's coming?
Do what you do.
Tito back there. You know what I'm saying? Killing me, man. Who made this? Did Jermaine Jackson make this list? I'm gonna put this meme out there and shit. I'm gonna put the meme out. I'm gonna put my name right here. So people won't notice.
His son, Your Majesty. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's he made
it. So I mean, I'm gonna just run down. If this was the list. If I was like, all right, man, we got us an Airbnb or Verbo or some other form of accommodations that I don't have a name for. Maybe my people's that has hotel business, like renting one of their hotels if they got one somewhere near Coachella. And so we got the rooms. You know what I'm saying? We got the fresh bread. We got the cool. I don't even think does Coachella function like the Dell where I could bring a lawn chair and a cooler.
Yeah, they do. They often have food too, but you can bring your own stuff too.
Okay, so I'm we posting up and I'm making a punch list. You know what I'm saying? Like Friday, I'm probably like, all right, man, because there's no way nobody has the stamina to go through all of these. Without the use of
you downplay young people. You downplay young people, man. They stay out all day for that shit, man.
I don't know how much of whatever you got to eat and drink to make you. I'm gonna need to take a break somewhere in here, man. But I mean, I'm gonna try to. I want to see. I gotta see Evelyn Champagne King. I gotta see Phyllis Hyman. You know what I mean? She ain't with us no more, but props to her because she gonna hit them notes and shit on you. You know what I'm saying? Be out there
living in confusion.
Like I said, I'm assuming Alexander O'Neal's popping out on stage with Sherelle. You know what I mean? That's just gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? All right, so I probably go see Janet. I probably see Definitely Mills, Diana Ross. Yeah, I think I could get them 5. You know what I'm saying? Especially if they on the back. Or I do like a morning. I don't know. I think they gotta have like the morning session. Saturday, I'm gonna go see Prince because I like Prince. I'm gonna see Earth, Wind and Fire. Sade. I mean, like again, Patty's going. She's sliding up the chart anyway, so I don't know why she down there. And then I'll probably start out the day with the SOS band. You know what I mean? Just so they can like move me, get my wind right. You know what I mean? So you breathe, so you got a good bass. and then you got to see Rick James because it's gonna be a lot of dancing at Rick James. I'm about to need some Gatorade and like put a noon tablet in my Gatorade, so it'd be extra electrolyte replenishment. You know, and then Sunday. Damn, that's a hard. I can't even. I gotta do Stevie. That's a given. That's gonna be the end of the night. So we're gonna see Stevie anyway.
Right.
I'm gonna get to see the Gap Band. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna see Teddy. Probably. I ain't gonna see Jermaine. And I'll be sure it seemed a little too mellow for Coachella.
I mean, but if you do Off on Your Own, Girl.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, but if you think about it.
You're right. He do them 5 joints.
If I'm not your lover, if I'm not your friend. You know what I mean? Give him the Andre Harrell flavor.
And then
Champagne and Bubbles.
You know, because Luther Vandross gonna be there like, you're bad boy.
Yeah, he gonna give him that early him and David Bowie when he was singing with David Bowie, and then he gonna give him like once he decided that fast songs wasn't his
right. He said he left them fast. He gonna do all the fast joints. You know what I'm saying? But I probably pass on him just because I seen him and see if I could get maybe get in there with Mariah Carey. You know, give her like 15, 20 minutes. You know, because I don't need. I like she can sing her ass off. I know she's an international performer, but I got to take a break somewhere.
No, I'm with you. I'm just real quick. Friday, Evelyn Champagne King, just for her to sing Love Come Down. I'm not going nowhere when Anita Baker sing. I'm just gonna sit there the whole time with a cooler and a glass of wine and not move nowhere. And so she can y'all know, man, let me tell you something. Then Sherelle, because I like to your point, Alexander O'Neal's gonna bum rush the show. Jody Watley, if Rakim ain't with, I ain't listening because she ain't with Shalimar.
I about to say, is Shalimar coming? Or is it just Jody?
Yeah,
no offense to Jody.
You gotta say it's the Shalimar.
Right, now, how are you gonna pop out? You know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna get some. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Tonight. Yeah. I'm gonna get some of that.
Yeah.
You know
so if Shalimar's there, then I'm with that. I mean, I'm not really a big Diana Ross fan. Tina Turner, you got to listen for What's Love Got to Do with It just because you black and your mother listened to it. That Saturday, SOS Band, again, Patty, much like Anita Baker, I'm Not Moving. Here, Langstar sing Always. Rick James do Everything. Cameo do Sparkle.
Oh, man, I didn't even want to bring up Cameo because it was too much work. I just didn't see how I could make it do all that.
Have Angela Bofill, do all them sad songs with her amazing, beautiful voice. You know what I'm saying? Just sit there, put my hat on in front of my head, and just listen and sway. Because by that time, I've been out there too long.
You got one of them straw joints with the brim. You got to add a joint with the brim, the straw joint.
You got the brim, put it back on my head, laying back on the joint, and then obviously, because Earth, Wind and Fire, because to hear Earth, Wind and Fire sing, would you mind? So, and then when Sade does whatever Sade wants to do, I don't care. Sade she could do all the Diamond Lights. Right. I don't give what nobody say. She could do all of them. Listen, she could do that album in '96 that I didn't like too much. I mean, Lovers Rock in 2000 that I wasn't too fond of. I don't care. And then again, Peebo, because Peebo was the man. The Whispers, I'm about to go listen to now.
Yeah,
because it's the Whispers. The Gap Band, to hear them do their interesting blend of funk and rock. I mean, to your point, Luther, Dionne Warwick, and Michael Jackson. But to be able to hear Stevie do something from The Secret Life of Plants all the way up to Don't Drive Drunk.
Right. I'm saying,
in these 3 words.
Right. I'm in there crying and blubbering and shit, like, these words. I'm like,
to go to somebody do the sunshine, you are the sunshine of my life, all the way to these 3 words. Right. You know what I'm saying? That itself is an entire, to hear him do the song about the all the months. Well, I just called to say I love you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, so I mean, you got certain people you need to see. So yeah, man, it's an interesting thing, but again, it makes you also have this broader conversation around nostalgia, right? Because I think all these concepts are around this concept of nostalgia and like what we think things were and what they were, right? So the conversation around the Black dollar, the conversation around leadership, right? And the conversation even around the 80s and music, all kind of boil down to this nostalgia. And that nostalgia is beautiful, but it can also be disarming, and it can also lie to you about what happened.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So,
and
but yeah, man.
All right. Well, I close it with mine is to say, and I think is in tune to that, is that, even as we look to the past, but even when we look to the past, we have to understand it. We understand it and look at it from the context of the present, right? And that we have to remain in the present in our decision making and in our actions. Have an understanding of what preceded, but look at those things that worked in the past that still work now. Getting together, getting a squad still works to get something done. Connecting with people, making space to connect with each other still works to get things done. Being challenging, but then also looking at the situation on the ground. Like, all right, man, well, here's what we can get today. All right, let's get that. You know what I mean? And those things still work to make the changes or to make things happen for folks. And then that you need, every hero needs a theme music. You know what I'm saying? So, get out there, you out in the streets doing your thing, man. Get your jams that keep you energized and keep you in a positive mind frame. And that's what a day.
My man.
Right, well, so with that, I'm gonna say we had a wrap. We'll catch them on the next one. Peace.
My man. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Ask Your Oldhead Podcast with Justice Rajee and my good brother. I'm Majestic. You can find Good Brothers on Instagram at goodbrothers_pod. You can find me at Justice Rajee, just the way it sounds. You can find I'm Majestic at I'm Majestic, also on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter at Justice Rajee. We make these every week. We record something, and I get these out as fast as I can. And I hope that, time doesn't move too fast between when you can listen to what we had to add on and when you get to, where the world is at that time when it comes out. But in any event, man, the most important thing is that you listen, share, leave some feedback. Send a brother a message. You see the Coachella, piece I'm gonna plop up. Get some comments, some commentary, add on. And in all things, let's struggle together. Let's work together towards a collective future and not just an independent vision. And with that, I say peace.